Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Battles of the American Civil War with Bang and Dang, and wrapping up the few battles that we got before we get to the last big battle of 1863, Chickamauga. We got 3 of them here today: Second Sabine Pass, the Bayou Fourche, and Davis's Crossroads. But before we do that, have you guys head over to our YouTube at Bang Dang Network. Give us a subscribe, click that bell, and like, comment, do all that stuff on the videos. Or if you listen on the podcast version, give us a review, rate us, leave a comment on the Spotify or iTunes, and yeah, let's get some interaction going with you fellas and ladies, wherever you are, while you heard a burp in the middle of my promo. But
It would be nice. It would be nice.
would be, but until then, we got Second Sabine Pass coming up first. September 8th, 1863, we're winding down the year of 1863, was a failed Union Army attempt to invade the Confederate state of Texas. France was openly sympathetic to the Confederate States of America early in the war, but never matched his sympathy with diplomatic or military action. After Mexican forces were defeated by French forces in the summer of 1863, Mexican President Benito Juarez escaped the capital, and the French installed Austrian Maximilian as emperor. Emperor of Mexico.
Emperor of Mexico. With the de facto French government bordering Texas on the south across the Rio Grande, the Confederates hoped to establish a formal route between Texas and Mexico, by way of which the Confederacy would obtain much-needed supplies. But Abraham Lincoln from the Union was like, I see what you guys are doing there, and I am going to send an expedition to establish a military presence in Texas. And I'm also going to discourage Maximilian from opening trade with them rebs.
Yeah, can't be having that.
The military federal force was commanded by Major General Nathaniel P. Banks, a political general with little discernible command ability. Banks' original intent was to launch a combined Army-Navy campaign in northwest Louisiana.
Yeah, well, we already know how much the Army and Navy work together.
Not very much.
The Union plan was to send Union Navy warships from the Mississippi up the tributary Red River, which was navigable upstream as far as where the boundaries of the Confederate states of Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas came together. The Union had effected its capture of New Orleans May 1st, 1862, and after the July 3rd Vicksburg defeat, the Union military had better control of both the east and west banks of the mouth of the Mississippi. Unusually low water in the Red River at this time, however, prevented even relatively low draft Union gunboats from operating effectively, and the anticipated overland Union invasion of Texas was further delayed.
Damn right it was. And the Union right now is on a riding a big old high after getting Vicksburg and Gettysburg. They're like, yeah, we can do anything. Let's go to Texas.
Yeah.
Consequently, General Banks ordered his subordinate, Major General William Franklin, who would coordinate with the United States Navy. He said, enter the Sabine River from the Gulf of Mexico and defeat that small Confederate detachment at Fort Sabine on the river's west bank, which is the Texas side, at the Sabine Pass, about 2 miles upstream of the river mouth. The key United States Navy target in the first Battle of Sabine Pass was the original earthworks thrown up on the Texas bank of the Sabine River, about 3 miles south of the Sabine City. A tiny town with some wharfs on the east side of its main street, which are the little docks or whatever.
Type deals, yeah. U.S. Army battle plan was that after the U.S. Navy gunboats silenced the guns of Fort Sabine, the wave of about 200 U.S. Army infantrymen riding the deck of one of the main fleet's reserve gunboats would debark immediately below, which is east of the fort, and effected the fort's surrender. The main fleet, less than 5 miles offshore and well beyond Confederate gunfire, contained as many as 20 vessels, which carried U.S. Army regulars, as many as 5,000 of them, according to official records. A small artillery was also included. Company-sized initial landing force was then to take Sabine City and secure the area for the main force.
Damn right it was. After the main force was landed and united with the initial assault company, the intention was to march a few miles north to the railroad and cut the railroad between Houston and Beaumont. Once this was done, the Army force would march east, presumably destroying all rail line as it went, and then attack Beaumont. This action would deny Sabine Pass and the natural shallow water harbor Sabine Lake upstream from the Gulf about 6 miles to blockade runners.
All right. Well, considering the dominant size of the Union Expeditionary Force, taking control of Sabine Pass and environs was not expected to be a great challenge to the forces.
Oh, of course.
To prevent intervention from the Confederate forces in Louisiana, they consisted of That consisted of Brigadier General Thomas Green's 1st Cavalry and Brigadier General Alfred Mouton's infantry.
His bum is on your lips.
Right. If you're lucky, you just might give it a little kiss, Albert Mouton. The Union Division of Major General Francis J. Huron moved to Morganza as a diversion, which precipitated in the Battle of Sterling's Plantation, which we'll have.
Right, it did, and damn right we will. Fort Sabine had been renamed Fort Griffin in honor of an earlier commander, which was Confederate Lieutenant Colonel W.H. Griffin. Although this was not shown on Union maps since the first Battle of Sabine Pass in late September 1862. Who cares?
Okay.
It's the same fort, people know. The Confederate detachment residing at the Sabine Pass fort was the Jeff Davis Guards, named for Confederate President Jefferson Davis.
Oh, Jeffrey.
You think he like Jeffrey, Jeff, or Jefferson?
I think Jefferson. I don't think anybody called it Jeff. Like Timothy was always Timothy's, not like Tim.
Right.
Probably.
They never called Jefferson on Married Children Jeff.
Right. I don't know how that guy came to your mind, but yeah.
That's the only ever Jefferson I ever heard of.
Besides the Jeffersons.
Right. A company of mostly Irish American men from Houston and Galveston area, which was the Jeff Davis Guards, and they had recently merged into the 1st Texas Heavy Artillery.
All right, they were stationed at the Hastily-built earthworks a mile upstream, which was north on the southwest bank of the pass. When the battle began with the Union gunboats' bombardment on September 8th, at the fort were 46 men, all but 2 or 3 were members of the Davis Guard.
Oh.
Under the immediate command of Lieutenant Richard W. Dowling, the Davis Guards had mounted their unit's 6 old smoothbore cannon on the elevated platform of the small earthen fort.
They might be old,
But they'll still do. And they're smoothbore, though, so they ain't going very far.
although unimpressive to Union observers and scouts. The fort's guns position were high enough to afford a clear view to the horizon for many, many miles. The flat marshland stretched northeastward into Louisiana, and then also westward towards Houston, and then southwestward towards Galveston, also northward towards Port Arthur and Beaumont, and then southeastward into the Gulf of Mexico.
Hey, they went everywhere.
Went everywhere. The nearest observation point affording a view of Fort Griffin, other than from the mast top of a naval vessel seaward of the pass, was the Sabine Pass Lighthouse on the Louisiana side of the Sabine Pass at the mouth of the Sabine River. And we all know the Union took care of Louisiana.
Well, some of it.
Right.
On the afternoon of September 8th, U.S. Navy Lieutenant Frederick Crocker, who was acting captain, was in command of the advanced squadron composed of 4 gunboats. Crocker was a veteran officer of considerable recent experience in Union River gunboat actions and blockade duty. His ship was the USS Clifton, which is a steam-powered sidewheeler. Besides the Clifton, you had Crocker's advanced squadron that included Granite City, Sachem, and Arizona, all recently commissioned ironclad warships.
Nice.
Less than 3 miles southeast, downriver, well out of range of the Confederate fort's cannons, were anchored 7 U.S. Navy transports carrying most of the Army soldiers of the landing force that was to be, or hopefully to be.
Well, they couldn't even come even close.
Right.
The USS Suffolk, hosting invasion force commander U.S. Army Major General Franklin and his staff, headed the 7-vessel squadron. Outside the principal Gulf Shore sandbar, an additional 2 miles downstream of this squadron, lay an anchor the remaining ships of the 22-vessel invasion fleet. The cited contemporary United States Army map, it shows the nominal positions of the bombardment fleet of 4, the 7 ships of the transport squadron, and the relative position farther out in the Gulf of the remaining vessels.
I would hope so.
The official reports of the battle generally reflects the map's information.
I would hope so.
I mean, that's why you did it.
Jeez. The total number of Union infantry assault troops in the landing force, like we said, was as many as 5,000 infantrymen, which included 500 listed as aboard the Granite City. These aboard the 6 troop transports and the 7-ship squadron headed by Suffolk, plus an artillery company somewhere among them. The first wave of 500 men aboard Granite City, which steamed as close behind Clifton as possible, but out of range of the fort's guns, were to land in the open space adjacent to and downstream of the fort.
All right. Well, this was a flat, often muddy area, already cleared of brush by the old ribs, as a clear field of fire for the canister and grape of the fort's artillery. The United States Army invasion plan, therefore, absolutely required that the Confederate guns be silenced before any troops were debarked. This engagement was to be the largest amphibious assault on an enemy territory in the history of the United States military up to this date. Leon Smith, who was at Beaumont, Texas, immediately ordered all Confederate troops into Beaumont.
I wonder if that amphibious assault stayed the largest until, obviously, D-Day, right?
Most likely, right?
Probably.
No, the United States military didn't do anything that day. That just got blown up.
D-Day?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Pearl Harbor.
Oh, sorry.
Storming the beaches of Normandy, man.
Right.
I had to. That's still the largest amphibious assault to this day, but was there a larger one after this and before that? Is what I'm saying.
It's very possible. Immediately ordered all Confederate. Leon Smith, who was at Beaumont, he ordered all Confederate troops into Beaumont, some 80 men. Oh, give me all.
Give me every one of them.
He ordered all the men aboard the steamer Roebuck and sent them down the river to reinforce Fort Griffin.
All right, Smith and a Captain Good rode to the fort on horseback, reaching the fort some 3 hours before the steamer, arriving just as the Union gunboats Clifton and Sachem came within range and assisted in the defense of the fort.
Uh-oh.
Dowland's well-practiced Irish Texan artillerymen, whose chosen and officially approved unit name was the Jeff Davis Guards, yes,
right,
had placed range stakes in two narrow and shallow river channels. These were the Texas Channel near the southwest shore and the Louisiana Channel against the Louisiana shore.
5 to 7 feet, dude. That's perfect river for swimming.
Right.
I want to go canoeing on that one. The white painted stakes were for determining accurate range of the fort's guns. 6 old smoothbore cannons. Each Davis Guards gun crew during gunnery practice thereby worked to predetermine the approximate charge, which was the amount of gunpowder needed for each type projectile available for their specific gun, which was either a ball, a canister, or a grape shot, and which specific guns and charges and loads had the best potential to hit each range stake. Once they figured that shit out, they were like, come on in.
They were prepared.
The Union's Crocker Squadron had no local river pilots, only general knowledge of the river's channels, no assurance of locations of the constantly varying depths, especially of the large oyster shell, which is reefs or banks between the river's two channels. Regarding this battle, no mention is found in an official United States Navy report of whether Union sailors were making observations and taking depth soundings from the gunboats, which are now dangerous top decks, while the Confederate cannon shots pounded and shook their ships.
The few maps to which they had access were old and outdated or could not account for recent changes in river bottom conditions.
It's their fault.
On Captain Crocker's signal, the Sachem, followed by the Arizona, advanced up the right channel on the Louisiana side as fast as they dared, firing their port side guns at the fort. Clifton approached in the lead, ascending the Texas Channel at full speed, though. I said getting there fast.
You ain't getting. Granite City hovered out of range behind Clifton, having orders not to risk debarking the 500 assault troops until the fort surrendered or its guns were silenced. As Sachem entered among the range stakes, the Confederates opened fire. Then Clifton came into range, followed by Arizona. Despite their old smoothbore cannons, one of which had just become inoperable. After only a few rounds, it was obvious the Confederate artillerymen's months of training and target practice was an astounding success, as their aim was deadly accurate.
Deadly. The Confederates ended up capturing the Clifton and the Sachem with a total of 13 heavy cannon.
Nice.
Damn, including at least 2 new potent Parrott rifles.
Hey, they needed these.
Right, which were handed over to Leon Smith's Texas Marine Department prompt. Union casualties amounted to 24 killed and badly wounded, about 37 missing, 315 Navy men captured.
Damn.
The combined Union Army and Navy invasion force withdrew and returned to New Orleans.
Bet they did.
The Confederates had 0 casualties.
Makes sense. In recognition of this old victory, the Rebs Congress passed a resolution of special thanks to the officers and the men of the Davis Guard. In addition, Houston residents raised funds to provide medals to the Guard. The Davis Guards medals were made from silver Mexican pesos by smoothing off the coins, then hand stamping and hand engraving on one side, the battle name and the date on the other side, which initials DG and a cross pat. Patty?
Pate, right?
Cross patty, yeah.
It's like the
cross,
the
medal.
what are those guys called?
Yeah.
The Crusaders and all that, the cross.
Right. The medals were hung on green ribbons and presented to the members of the Davis Guard.
Clearly.
The official Confederate silver medals were presented in a public ceremony years later.
Oh, good for them. Well, a year later.
Just a year later. Months later.
Right. The Battle of Sabine Pass was of moderate tactical or strategic significance to the war. It was successful in ensuring that the anticipated overland Union invasion of Texas was delayed indefinitely.
Right.
Confederate supply line from Mexico to Texas had existed out of the port of Baghdad since the outbreak of the war, but was held by the increasingly isolated Mexican Republicans. By the time Imperial French and Mexican forces captured Baghdad in 1864, a supply line to anywhere in the Confederacy east of the Mississippi was no longer feasible on the account of Vicksburg being taken in July of 1863.
Once Vicksburg, oh man, I think Vicksburg was more than Gettysburg.
Clearly. At least to the east, the west of the Mississippi, because you ain't getting shit out there no more.
Man.
The Confederacy was therefore forced to continue its reliance on blockade running to import valuable materials and resources.
Hey, gotta hate that.
Yeah.
Moving on. Next battle. Battle of Bayou Fourch, also known as the Battle of Little Rock.
Little Rock.
And the engagement at Bayou Fourche. This took place on the 10th of September in the year of 1863 in Pulaski County, Arkansas.
Nope, 2 days after the last one, yeah.
And it was the final battle of the Little Rock Campaign, also known as the Advance upon Little Rock. Is that a song? Which began on the 1st of August to capture the capital, which of Little Rock. On the 4th of July, 1863, Vicksburg, Mississippi, the Gibraltar of the Confederacy fell, with the Mississippi again, and in President Lincoln's words, or they're running an unvexed to the sea. Major General Frederick Steele was commanding the Arkansas expedition. He proceeded from Helena on August 10th to lead the invasion of 12,000 Union troops west into Arkansas. Mm-hmm. This was awakening to the distant rumble of artillery. September 10th, the citizens of Little Rock found themselves in the vortex of the conflict.
They're like, oh shit, never thought it'd come to us.
Right.
September 10th, Steele sent a cavalry division led by Brigadier General John Davidson across the Arkansas to advance on Little Rock while he moved against Confederate forces strongly entrenched on the north side of the river. In his thrust towards the state capital, Davidson ran into Brigadier General, that old pesky John Marmaduke, and Walker's division, commanded by Marmaduke, near the Bayou Fourche.
Hell yeah. Well, aided by field artillery from the north side of the river, Davidson forced Marmaduke out of his position and sent the defenders fleeing back to Little Rock, which fell to Union forces that very evening. General Price, commanding at Little Rock, fell back to Arkadelphia on the 14th and eventually reestablished his command at Camp Bragg, which is in Arkansas. Governor Harris Flanagan relocated the state capital to Washington, Arkansas, whereas remained. It should always be Washington.
Right. Anytime you got a Washington in your state, it's got to be the capital, right?
Right. Whereas remained for the rest of the war. The fall of Little Rock to Union forces after Vicksburg sealed Arkansas's fate and helped to further demoralize Confederate citizens west of the Mississippi.
Yeah, things looking pretty dire on the west side over there.
The growth of Little Rock has obscured many of the sites associated with the battle and subsequent evacuation of the city. Today, several markers and monuments are located inside the Bayou Fourche battlefield. But further expansion of Little Rock National Airport, you already know what happened there. We want to lay some cement down here.
Right. Put some temperature gauges by it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That was a little nothing. They got the capital of Arkansas, though, huh?
Yeah.
Which leads us to the last battle of the day, which is the Battle of Davis's Crossroads, September 10th through the 11th in northwestern Georgia, as part of that old Chickamauga campaign of the war. This will lead directly into that Battle of Chickamauga.
Ooh.
It was more of a series of maneuvers and skirmishes than an actual battle, and casualties were negligible. In the initial stages of the campaign, Union Major General William Rosecrans's Army of the Cumberland induced the Confederate Army of Tennessee under General Braxton Bragg to evacuate the city of Chattanooga, which we just covered.
Right.
Rosecrans dispatched 3 corps on 3 different roads towards northwestern Georgia.
Hey, fantastic. The corps on the center road was the 14th Corps under Major General George Thomas, which moved just across the border to Trenton, Georgia, and prepared to move on to Lafayette in pursuit of Bragg. Lafayette was the present location of Bragg's army, obviously. Due to misinformation and poor intelligence, Rosecrans was convinced that Bragg was demoralized and was retreating to Dalton, farther to the southeast Georgia. But once he realized that Union forces had separated and were vulnerable, Bragg intended to attack Thomas, halt his advance, and defeat him where he stands.
Intended. Well, Thomas's corps raced forward, seized the important gaps in Missionary Ridge and Pigeon Mountain, and moved out into Macklemore Cove. Major General James Negley's division, supported by Brigadier General Absalom Baird's division was moving across the mouth of the cove on the Dug Gap Road when Negley learned that Confederate units were concentrated around Dug Gap. Moving through determined resistance, he closed on the gap, withdrawing to Davis's Crossroads on the evening of September 10th to await the supporting division.
Damn right he did. He had to. Bragg had ordered Major General Thomas Hindman with his division to assault Negley in the flanks at Bragg had ordered Major General Thomas Hindman with his division to assault Negley in the flank at Davis's Crossroads, while Major General Patrick Claiborne's divisions forced its way through Dug Gap to strike Negley right in the front. Hindman was to receive reinforcements for this movement, but Guess what? Most of them did not arrive.
Like, I don't feel like going there.
The Confederate officers therefore met and decided that they could not attack in their present condition. The very next morning, fresh troops did arrive. And the Confederates are like, let's go.
Well, we can move now. The supporting Union division had by now joined Negley, and hearing of the Confederate attack, Union forces determined that a strategic withdrawal to Stevens Gap was in order. Negley first moved his division to the ridge east of the West Chickamauga Creek, where it established a defensive line. The other division then moved through them to Stevens Gap and established a defensive line there.
No.
Both divisions awaited the rest of Thomas's corps. All of this was accomplished under constant pursuit and fire from the old Rebs.
Really? After this abortive attempt to attack one isolated Union corps, General Bragg turned his attention to the corps to his north. The 21st Corps under Major General Thomas Crittenden. This setting the stage for the bloody Battle of Chickamauga on September 19th, 1863, which is the bloodiest battle since Gettysburg.
Actually, it's the
third bloodiest battle, I think.
In terms of
Deadliest battle?
In terms of bloody and stuff. It's right after Gettysburg, I believe. And which is our very next battle, which is next week's episode on the Battle of Chickamauga. And that's it for this episode. Two very short ones and one kind of decent one. The Sabine Pass was kind of decent. The other ones were just like, come through and do some shit and get out of there. Pretty much. With that being said, go check out our other podcasts. Namely, Outlaws and Gunslingers, which we're in the middle of the Mafia right now. This week's episode was all about we actually wrapped up the Genovese family, so we're done with them. And next week's episode, we're going to be moving into the Bonanno family, who's the second oldest Mafia family out there. And you might know them as the Donnie Brasco guys. Donnie Brasco infiltrated those guys and got a lot of people killed in the process after it was found out. And according to Wikipedia, where we take random Wikipedia articles, read them, react to them, and that's pretty much it. This week's episode's about the dodo bird. Yes, you heard that right, the dodo bird. But next week's episode's a little more interesting about the first industrial revolution.
Oh my.
And that one's a long one, a two-parter there. So go check us out on at the Bang Dang Network on YouTube. Also, where you get your podcasts. Leave a like, review, subscribe, all that shit. And we'll be back for Chickamauga next week on the Battle of the American Civil War. We are the Mouth Michiganders with Bang Dang.